I think the first thing to say is employer expectations haven't actually shifted that much. I think if you read stuff on AI, you would think the workplace has been transformed. There's definitely a lot of change. It's transformative technology, but it takes time to really bed in. But I think kind of two of the big changes you maybe do see is in the areas affected by AI. Firstly, people are obviously very keen on employees who have AI skills and use these tools. And then also I think employers are particularly keen on more senior candidates, and probably you have a shift towards more seniors who then have AI doing some of the more grunt work type stuff and relatively fewer juniors. But as I say, the overall effect is still relatively small, but I'm sure will grow in future. Yeah, I think there's relatively few people who do have AI skills and have actually, even the basic, not necessarily complex machine learning, all of this type of stuff, but the basics of building some automations with a no-code tool online and kind of creating a prompt and these sort of stuff. They're pretty easy skills to learn, but still not many people actually have them and have done that work. And then within Africa specifically, as a more general point, there's not that large of a supply, in the startup space of senior employees. The startup space hasn't existed that long. It's massively grown. And so there's just very few people who've been doing it for 10 years because there were almost no jobs 10 years ago. And so you see, even relative to startups in the UK or the US or something, there's even fewer people who've kind of been in startups a long time and have that experience. Sure, the best AI applications and resumes, I probably don't realize are AI applications or resumes. That would be my top thing. I think the obvious mistakes are there's a tone of voice that sounds like unrefined ChatGPT output. You've got lots of long dashes in text. It's lots of it's not just this, it's this, and that kind of phrasing and so on. So I think prompting it, refining the output so that it actually sounds like a human. And then the second thing is people think AI can do all of the work. It can do quite a lot of the work, but you have to give it a good input to begin with. It doesn't know what you're good at or what you think about things or what your skills are. Unless you provide that information to it, it can then write them up nicely in a way that people can consume and use. But if you just plug the question in and say, write an answer and don't tell it anything about yourself or what you think, you're only going to get kind of generic slop as the answer as well. And then maybe my last one is, honestly, no one really reads cover letters much anyway. So just, keep that in mind as well. At Talent Safari, we don't ask for cover letters because we don't want to read them. So why make someone write them? Sure, I think there's some simple ones here. One is just the very basic, minimum requirements for a job. Do you turn up to things on time? Do you send follow-up emails? Are your emails written competently? All of these very simple things, particularly when interviewing someone, you're keeping them in mind. If someone sends you a really good, well-structured follow-up, you're like, okay, this person has good EQ. They clearly kind of have remembered to do the follow-up. Those things matter a lot. So, after your job interview, send a nice follow-up to the interviewer. They are actually probably going to see it and they're actually going to think, okay, this person switched on. Linked to that, communication skills. These are obviously overrepresented in interviews because you're talking to someone. So can you talk well? Can you communicate complex ideas? Can you talk about strategy? These kind of things are probably more important in job interviews relative even to how important they are in the job. And then the last one is references. Other people who say you're good. This is obviously always valuable. People do reference checks, but particularly if it's someone the employer knows and trusts who says they're good, jobs, that's 50% of it. Companies will basically, not bother doing an interview process. If they have someone good who someone they trust says is good, they're often willing to just go with that. So I think references of having lots of people who've seen your work, think it's really good, trust you enough to kind of refer you to a company. thinking probably gets a bit more important. There's going to be fewer and fewer jobs which are just turn up and do something really basic and bring it on a computer, basically, because AI is going to be able to do that. And so, yeah, I think the ability to think critically and do more complex stuff is going to be more important. And then how companies assess it have changed a bit, because certain things, if you give someone some kind of reasonably simple take-home work, then they can plug it into ChatGPT and you don't get a good sense of the quality of that output. The same thing. It's kind of people who are really bad at these things are still able to produce a 7 out of 10 output because ChatGPT can produce a 7 out of 10 output with no prompting. And so I think in-person interviews, references, like offline tasks are going to be relatively more important, and anything you can do with AI is probably going to be a bit less important, with the exception maybe of testing. Are you actually good at using AI? I think some of the best companies are looking at giving the kind of test that shows, can this person really intelligently use AI tools to complete their work? Then kind of the mid-level companies are sort of creating tests where the person can't use AI, and then probably the bad companies are letting people cheat on the test with AI and then hiring them. Yeah, I mean, the obvious one is use AI, but more practically, it's very easy to build some side projects with AI tools in your spare time. Go and build some automation for some brand. It doesn't have to be something useful, like get the AI to, suggest activities for your weekend based on what the weather is, or some random thing like that. Then, post about it on your LinkedIn, say on your CV that you're good with no-code AI tools, whatever. I think particularly in the startup space, that's a huge positive signal. It's both, okay, they use these tools, but it's also, wow, this person's really proactive. I think there's been, particularly for big companies, it's been quite a few years since companies started using some kind of machine learning or algorithm tools to screen CVs. And so there's been a lot of advice on here's how to game those tools by putting in lots of the keywords. My somewhat uninformed sense is actually that's probably becoming less important, because an AI tool is much more able to actually read the text and understand it, rather than just searching for keywords and pinging a 1 point per keyword type thing. So it's probably a bit closer to actually they're reading your CV, and it would be the same advice as 20 years ago. Maybe with the exception is you can probably get away with a bit more stuffing your CV with the kind of keywords that they might be looking for, and adapting your CV to the experience. And it's a bit easier to do that. Of course, you can use an AI tool to make those adaptations. One other thing on CV screening is I think everyone's worried are these tools going to be biased, these kind of things. My guess is they're going to be less biased than human beings are, more likely to actually they won't read your whole CV because it takes a split second, rather than a human's pretty likely to look at the photo, glance vaguely through a few words, then you're either in one file or the other, because they've got another 1,000 things to go through. So I would say actually, yeah, it's more likely to read your CV and more likely to actually digest the content of it. I don't think things have changed that much, but with AI coming into the market, I think there's less room for being a hardworking person who just does very routine junior tasks, because that's kind of getting replaced. And there's probably even more you can do if you're a high-level thinker who can kind of coordinate things, because you can achieve a lot more just as one person with these AI tools. Boring, but use AI.